missed you.
Oh, I missed you too. Great to see you. All right. In the dugout tonight, big league guests, a political tribute to the Chicago Cubs, and a pinch hitter, Donnie Deutsch. But first, explosive news out of North Korea, the second best Korea. Today, the DPRK said that it conducted an underground nuclear test amid threats of more sanctions from the United States and others. Donald Trump's campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, said on CBS this morning that North Korea would not dare do such a thing if her tough guy boss were president. And in a statement, the Trump campaign pointed the blame at Hillary Clinton's tenure at the State Department. Quote, Clinton promised to work to end North Korea's nuclear program as Secretary of State, yet the program has only grown in strength and sophistication. Hillary Clinton's North Korean policy is just one more calamitous diplomatic failure from a failed Secretary of State, end quote. On the counterpoint, Hillary Clinton's statement was about the temperament needed to be commander-in-chief. Quote, this is another reminder that America must elect a president who can confront the threats we face with steadiness and strength, end quote. This week, the presidential race has been unusually tuned to themes of national security. Both campaigns have devoted rallies to the topic in recent days and announced endorsements from retired military leaders. But the major event was when the candidates squared off on NBC for that commander-in-chief forum on the Intrepid. So, Donnie, I ask you here on this Friday, no longer a summer Friday, it's sort of a fall for post-summer Friday, post-Labor Day Friday. I ask you, looking back over the week of national security hubbub, who won the week on national security?
Who won the week, we'll find out November 8th. I really think this election was encapsulated by everything that happened this week. And it's a simple hand-to-hand combat. And the calculus is this from Trump's point of view, is that any bad foreign thing that happens, such as that happened today as far as North Korea and the nukes, it happened because of weakness, and it happened on Hillary Clinton's watch. Right. And I have a strong hand to fix it. If you're Hillary Clinton, the response is, no, 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 that's not a strong hand. That's a scary, unsteady hand, and I have the steady hand.
And an unusually small one.
And a usually small one that she's saving that for the day before election. And that is the calculus we're going back and forth. And the American public, and it's really a left brain, right brain decision, because Trump is actually not offering anything other than, I'm going to huff, I'm going to puff, I'm going to blow your house down. So we're not going to know until November 8th. I don't have the answer to that right now.
It is fascinating to me that both campaigns believe they won this week. I was just over at the Clinton headquarters in Brooklyn, and they think this week was great for them. Most people looked at the commander-in-chief forum and thought that Trump did better. Some people said that was because the questions were too easy, that she got tougher treatment. But he was just down at the Value Voters Summit down in Washington just now, speaking, saying, I killed her in this debate. Everybody thinks I'm the stronger commander-in-chief. It's interesting that both campaigns think they have the upper hand here. I do think one thing that has happened this week, though, as a result of all this coverage, is that the focus on substance is starting to move to the fore and away from style, where Trump often wins in terms of his style points. It's now people are starting to actually look at a little bit more of the substantive things. We're going to talk about Putin in a second. I think that plays to Hillary Clinton's favor in the long run.
This is, to that point, this election needs to be an IQ test for the American public. And I don't mean that in an elitist way. Versus,
well, you do a little.
A little bit.
A little. I mean, you can't help but be elitist.
But a man of the people elitist.
Right,
okay?
yeah, right.
Versus just, I'm strong, and here's what I'm going to do, versus, no, 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 here are the problems, what are your solutions? Right. And I hope the American public does some digging. I really, really, really do, because the fact that Trump thought he won that, and I think viscerally he did, is the scary thing.
And some of the polling shows that he has a point at this moment. Yes. All right, back in the USSR, Vladimir Putin is making a new addition to his file of nice things that Donald Trump has said about him. Last night, when a phoner between Trump and Larry King was broadcast on the Kremlin-backed English network RT America, Trump seemed to dismiss claims by American intelligence agencies that Russia was probably behind the recent cyber attacks against the Democratic Party.
Unlikely. I think maybe the Democrats are putting that out. Who knows? But I think that it's pretty unlikely. But who knows? I hope that if they are doing something, I hope that somebody's going to be able to find out so they can end it, because that would not be appropriate at all.
This afternoon, Trump mentioned Russia again during his speech at the Value Voters Summit that I was just talking about in Washington, D.C., while contrasting his foreign policy views with those of his Democratic opponent.
My administration, on the other hand, will work with any country that is willing to partner with us to defeat ISIS and halt radical Islamic terrorism. And by the way, that includes Russia. If they want to join us on knocking out ISIS, that is just fine as far as I'm concerned.
So a bunch of Republicans are freaking out that Donald Trump can't stop complimenting Putin. The man crush is making them uncomfortable. This week, Trump said Putin was a stronger leader than President Obama in response to RNC Chairman Reince Priebus. In response, the chairman told the AP that Trump does not agree with Putin's style of government. Also, House Speaker Paul Ryan distanced himself from Trump's characterization, calling Putin, quote, an aggressor that does not share our interests. Really, only Mike Pence and Ben Carson have taken Trump's side in terms of the Putin love. Yesterday on this show, our guests seemed puzzled about what benefit Trump gets by praising Putin, as were Mark and I. Today, we wanted to revisit this topic because there is now a person on the set who thinks, believes, suspects he has the answer. Donnie?
Yeah. Once again, IQ test for the American public.
Yeah.
When Trump says, you know, I respect him as a leader, what he's then drawing a line is, I'm going to be that kind of leader. That guy's in control. I'm going to be in control. What he doesn't say, and this is the IQ part, is yes, he's a strong leader because he kills his opponents, he jails journalists, and he runs as a dictator. He is banking on the visceral thing again, the non-substance thing again, that the American public does not dig further and understand that this man is a villain, that this man is a butcher as far as Putin is, and just says, yeah, we need a mother F in charge of our place also. That guy's tough. We need he's got that country right where he wants it. We need a guy like that. So once again, the IQ test for the American public is and I think Trump is making a bet that viscerally people are going to react that way.
I got to say, man, I think you're out to lunch on this. By the way,
I'm not agreeing. I'm telling you why he's doing it.
I think the reason he's doing it is because he is he's such an egomaniac and such a narcissist that anybody who says anything nice about him, he likes that person. In the end, I think that's all it comes down to. I think there's no strategy here whatsoever. It is the case that, according to the polling, and there's not great polling on this, but that there's polling out there that says Vladimir Putin has an 8% approval rating among Americans. Yeah. Americans may not dig, or they may dig. If you dig, you find out all the reasons not to like Vladimir Putin. But even the ones who aren't digging don't look at Vladimir Putin and say, that's the kind of guy I want to be running the United States of America.
They just do not have to, and I said this morning, that Donald Trump, like him or not, there are tells. He admires this guy. That's what's frightening. He admires this guy. To him, and it kind of is very scary as an American, in his mind, if he's a leader, does he understand maybe our executive branch does not operate like that executive branch? And I don't know if he makes that distinction. It's scary stuff. Okay. There's a new story out that is Hillary Clinton and her army of Brooklynites all abuzz today. Michael Isikoff at Yahoo News is reporting that in 2014, Donald Trump's foundation gave $100, that's $100,000, to a group that was suing New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. Schneiderman is, of course, the same guy who brought a case against Trump University a year earlier, claiming it defrauded students. The group Trump gave the money to was Citizens United Foundation, which was being run by Trump's new deputy campaign manager, David Bossie. They were suing the New York Attorney General over his efforts to require nonprofits to disclose the identity of their donors. This report comes after questions resurfaced this week about a separate donation Trump's foundation made to Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi around the same time her office was thinking about joining Schneiderman's lawsuit against Trump University. John, how big of a problem is this for Donald J. Trump, billionaire? I
think it is a significant problem, and here's the deal. The Bondi lawsuit, the Bondi story was problematic because, to start with, having his charity donate to her PAC was illegal, okay? This does not seem to be illegal. It was a charity donating to another alleged charity, David Bossie's nonprofit. However, the larger picture here is Trump University, claims of fraud. He first tries to bribe a public official, and may have, in fact, bribed a public official not to pursue that case. Then he takes his charitable money and donates it to an outfit that is all about trying to seek retribution against someone who is suing him over the Trump University thing. It all points to corrupt practices, and corrupt practices are a problem for Trump, not just because of corruption itself, but because corruption is what he wants to claim about Hillary Clinton. And if these stories build up, it takes that stick out of his hand.
That's the ultimate irony. So once again, I'm going to go back. IQ test for the American public. Obviously, Hillary Clinton has...
A lot of IQ tests for the American public today.
No, seriously. Okay, Hillary Clinton, we know the email. Donald Trump, every way he has conducted business, every way, whether it's, you go back to the sweetheart deal with Chris Christie on his bankrupt casinos, is using influence, peddling influence, tied up in the establishment between everything that he is running against. Right. I've never seen a bigger hypocrite run for any office, and it's just one after the other after the other. And the ultimate irony is this is what he's pointing to, the one instance, or even if you want to bring the foundation to instances, whereas we could draw 25 instances where Donald Trump has acted inappropriately within this establishment, industrial complex that he is running against.
The other thing that I think this story points to is the fact that, and it's something that, again, and people in Brooklyn are noticing, is that there were early efforts to try to go after Trump on a lot of controversies that didn't get a lot of traction, including Trump University. Now, suddenly, the press is going back and digging into those things again, and he's getting less of a free pass on some of these things. That's also bad news for him if the press starts going after Trump in the way that it has often gone after Hillary Clinton. So we have some great guests coming up. Former Congressman Harold Ford and Paul Ryan's pal, Dan Senor, are next.
Here?
Oh, he's
no
here.
way.
He's here.
Wow.
Senor and Junior. Later, we'll talk to the Republican Party Communications Director, currently working heavily in Trump Tower. That's Sean Spicer, and former Hillary Clinton chief strategist and guru, Mark Penn. But first, these words from our sponsors.
What I like to show you. I'm about to read something really pithy. Now it's time for Junior and Senor. Joining us now from Memphis, Tennessee, we have former congressman and current Hillary Clinton supporter, and a man that John Hyman just described as pretty. I kid you not.
He's pretty.
Mr. Harold Ford Jr. and Dan Senor, who has advised Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan.
He's talking about me. He said pretty.
Guys, real quickly, want to start with you, Harold, just handicapping the week in review. Simple 3 sentences. Who won the battle of Commander-in-Chief this week? Harold?
I agree more with your assessment of it, Donnie. I thought that substantively she continued to demonstrate her prowess and command, but politically he had a pretty good week.
Mr. Senor.
Dan's going to have a lot to say about this topic.
I have a lot to say.
But I only gave you 3 sentences.
All right, so I'll keep it short. I think that she should be doing better on the national security issue, and I think she will be doing better over time. But the more time she gets her national security discussions, or her explaining her national security positions, get bogged down in discussions about the email, it's not where she wants to be. She has the potential to be much stronger on national security issues.
If she doesn't win the national security issues, she does not win this election. But it's very, very simple.
I agree with you. Now, Trump, if I'm Trump, I don't want to be talking about national security, because whenever you talk about national security, the only thing the media, the donor class, and the electorate are paying attention to is, does this person have the temperament to sit in the big seat in the Situation Room in the Oval Office and make the tough decisions? And when he goes on and on about talking about these generals that were rolled over and characterizing in one of the most inappropriate ways the intelligence briefings he was receiving that really crossed the line, the way he talked about the intelligence briefings.
Sentences, by the way.
And lastly, the stuff he said about Putin is jarring. I don't get it. I don't get why him bear-hugging Putin, who is he speaking to with that, unless he just really believes it. So I think the cumulative effect of all of those raise the question, does he have the temperament, does he have the judgment to be in the big job, making big decisions about war and peace?
Harold, we've now come to a place where everyone, the one thing that both sides agree on is that the race has tightened over these last couple weeks. Just explain, well, first of all, how nervous does it make you to watch these polls, given what a bad stretch Donald Trump had for weeks and weeks and weeks and all the things he said and done, that the race has tightened this much? As a Hillary Clinton supporter, how nervous are you?
Well, I looked at this first conversation, this forum, as really a practice round. And we got a chance to see that Mr. Trump is not going to change his style. I think the fact that we're making the case that he's unpredictable, he's unsteady, that he is unproven in many fronts, and Mrs. Clinton is showing great capability and composure and competence. The problem we have at the moment is that a lot of what Mrs. Clinton, Secretary Clinton, is offering is not something that the country is rewarding for her yet. At least it's not coming through in the polls. I think in the next debate, the first debate, the 26th, which I think will be the most watched debate, and I happen to agree with a lot of things that Dan said there. I think that Mrs. Clinton, Secretary Clinton's got to be mindful of something that Donnie said as he was describing the way Trump is appealing. I do think that there's some validity to what Donnie shared as he talked about this bravado and appealing to Americans who may want to see a stronger or different kind of strength in the White House than what we've seen in President Obama. If I was Secretary Clinton, I'd try to smother him with vision and answers. I wouldn't. I think Dan is right. We need a succinct answer around the email server, and you got to pivot right away to talking about vision and answers, because you can't beat him at his game. She has to beat him on her terrain and force him to come to talk about substance, which he's entirely incapable and I think inept at doing.
And you said, obviously, and this has been said all along, this is a judgment on his temperament, but doesn't it, particularly at the debates, have to also come down to a level of knowledge and granularity? I mean, that's what has to happen at these debates. That's what has to happen from here on in from every journalist, is the fact that, no, it's not a question of just does his head spin in circles and spit out pea soup. It's a question of, could he answer the question that Mike Barnacle posed yesterday to Gallagher? You know, does he know Aleppo? I mean, these things start to have to happen at some point.
So I would say two things. I'd say, first of all, if the unhinged, wound up, highly emotional, undisciplined Trump shows up at the debate, some of which we saw during the primary debates, I think she's in great shape.
Yes.
She doesn't have to do much, because there's the contrast. She's on a stage. It's effectively a presidential stage. They're made to look like equals, and he doesn't act the part. So I think that's a massive advantage for her if he performs that way. If he shows up the way he showed up at his press conference with the president of Mexico, calm, sober, I think they sedated him right before, whatever they did, that's a problem for her, because he's going to be on the stage. There's this normalizing effect of being on the stage. It looks presidential. So to your question, what she's got to do is just constantly yield time to him and say, tell us your plan, and really explain to us what you're going to do. I will give you some of my time, the way Rubio did in one of the debates against Trump. He says, I'll yield you my time. Tell me your health care plan. No, just don't tell me about the lines. Talk specifically about your health care plan. I think a combination of that plus hanging him with his own words. I thought her alt-right speech was very effective, because it didn't overreach. It just hung him with his own words. Very specific quotes, very specific details. A combination of that and forcing him to explain his policies, if he's calm in the debate, is the only way to go.
Dan, let me ask you this question. There was a lot of talk for months about the possibility that if Trump was collapsing, that the Republican Party would abandon him effectively. Paul Ryan your friend, continues to hover on that balance, on that tightrope. It doesn't seem like the party's now abandoning him. It seems like his improvement in the poll numbers have put him in pretty good, better stead. So just explain what you think is now the relationship between the Republican Party and down-ballot Republicans and the Trump campaign.
I think most down-ballot Republicans and operatives working for them believe that Trump is probably going to lose. They think it would be probably a good thing if he does lose. They just don't want him to lose so badly that he crushes some of these House and Senate seats that could hang in the balance. I think that's, if I had to sum it up in a few seconds, that's what it is. They get that he's probably going to lose. They think it's probably a good thing. They think we can rebuild. 4 years of Hillary Clinton, the third term of Obama won't be great for conservatism, but conservatism can survive it. But they don't want him to get so crushed that we definitely lose the Senate and the House gets a little close.
Harold, next week, game plan for Hillary Clinton. Give me the quick playbook coming off this kind of very, at best, toss-up week.
So I think part of it was toss-up just because I do think the forum itself, perhaps the setup and the questions may have benefited Mr. Trump a bit more. But to your question, I think she's got to do what I tried to say earlier in the show. She's got to just smother him with her answers and with her vision. She's got to get out on the road and I think multiply the number of events she's doing each day. I think Mr. President Obama has committed to giving October to this campaign. He may have to start a week or two sooner to ensure that the turnout, particularly amongst African-American and young voters across the country, is as high as it could possibly be. And Mrs. Secretary Clinton's got to deploy, I think, Bill Clinton to do a little more talk about how the economic message for this campaign is going to play out if she's elected president.
Harold, appreciate it.
There's no need to panic on their side. They just got to be willing to pound it more and understand where they are.
All right, we're going to wrap up. Dan Senor, Howard Ford Jr., otherwise known as Senor Jr., that will be opening at the Tiki Room in Route 22 in Wyckoff, New Jersey. 22. Sean Spicer from the RNC joins us in just a bit, but up next, Will Leach steps up to the plate for a look at America's two favorite pastimes, politics and baseball.
With less than a month before the baseball playoffs, the Chicago Cubs are the best team in baseball, and they are on track, of course, to clinch their division title. And let's just say that their record has been nothing short of bigly, which is newsworthy enough on its own. We talked to our great friend Will Leach about this, and he pointed out something else that's newsworthy, that the franchise has some fascinating ties both to Donald Trump and to Hillary Clinton. We said, prove it, and he filed this.
The story in Major League Baseball this year, and perhaps in all of sports, is the Chicago Cubs. Cubs have the best record in baseball, and they're, of course, loaded with celebrity fans, from Eddie Vedder to Bill Murray to Vince Vaughn, all paying homage to the Fuzzy Cubbies. For all the excitement the Cleveland Cavaliers conjured by winning the city's first title in more than 60 years, that's nothing compared to what would happen if the Cubs won the World Series. They haven't won a championship since 1908, when Teddy Roosevelt was president. The Cubs are no strangers to presidential politics. Ronald Reagan loved the team. As a young wannabe actor, he would do radio broadcasts of Cub games, recreated from box scores. He would ultimately bring that story full circle, taking the mound to throw out the first pitch at Wrigley Field himself. Bill Clinton saw his final baseball game in office from a skybox at Wrigley, and Barack Obama, the most famous Chicago White Sox fan on the planet, even said he was cheering last year for the Cubs to win the World Series. Flash forward to the 2016 season.
If the Cubs win the World Series, it will be a party like we haven't seen in sports in decades. And if it happens, it will go down just 1 month before the presidential election, which means you can count on it being a factor in the race. In some ways, a Cubs pennant race might magnify America's major concerns with each candidate.
For Trump, polls say it's his temperament. Back in the 90s, all was good for Trump and the Cubs. Trump loved the Cubs. He threw out a first pitch, sang the seventh inning stretch, and became, quote, close friends with Cubs great Sammy Sosa during his home run chase. But that has changed. After the Ricketts family, which owns the Cubs, began financing anti-Trump super PACs, Trump exploded, tweeting, "I hear the Ricketts family, who own the Chicago Cubs, are secretly spending money against me. They better be careful. They have a lot to hide." In March, still angry, he actually threatened to run attack ads against the Cubs. Then on the other side, there is Hillary Clinton and her struggle to convince voters she is authentic. Well, Clinton is actually a Cubs fan, we think. From her time in Illinois growing up, she claimed Cubs fandom, and she once had a surreal experience with Harry Carey in the booth, and she even sang with him. But that changed. In vintage Clinton fashion, when she ran for Senate in New York, she claimed to be a Yankees fan as well, much to the chagrin of her then opponent Rudolph Giuliani, in an interview with Katie Couric on the Today Show.
The fact is, I've always been a Yankees fan.
I thought you were a Cubs fan.
I am.
Well, as you might suspect, now she's back with the Cubs, saying this year she'd be willing to sign an executive order banishing the curse of the Billy Goat.
Trump and Clinton, temperament and authenticity. The Cubs and their dance with destiny. I cannot wait for October. Though, I'll confess, in this case, it's a little easier if you want to dance with the third-party candidates.
Oh, we'll be right back.
Okay, in a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Sean Spicer from the RNC, who's now kind of in-house campaign person working with the Trump people. So what do you think is going, if you're Spicer, I'm going to ask him this, what is he saying to Trump. What is he saying to Trump's people about his fixation, his bromance, his man crush on Putin?
I don't think, there have been a lot of things that Donald Trump has done that have made Republicans uncomfortable over the course of this cycle. But this example is right at the top, I think. You saw it in Paul Ryan's face yesterday. The notion, it is just a fact that if a Democratic candidate, if Barack Obama, when he was running in 2008, had suggested that Vladimir Putin was a better leader than George W. Bush, the Republicans would have tried to crucify him.
Or how about calling our generals rubble?
Rubble. But even in that instance, at least you could say that Trump was trying to say that they had been worn down under Obama's lack of leadership. The Putin thing is in a different category, and it puts Republicans, when Clinton yesterday said this thing about would Ronald Reagan have ever said anything like this, that the leader of Russia was a better leader than the president of the United States of whatever party, that resonates with a lot of establishment Republicans. They hear that and think, man, I do not want to be asked this question. I do not want to be confronted with this from the top of the ticket. And so, does it going to matter in down ballot races? Probably not. But boy, I think it does not make him any more popular among folks at the RNC and Republicans across the land.
Okay, now joining us, D.C. Communications Director and Chief Strategist for the RNC, Sean Spicer. Sean, thank you for joining us. Sean, I'm sure you've been eavesdropping. We're talking about your candidate's infatuation, I will say, with Vladimir Putin. If you were alone in a room with Mr. Trump right now and you were counseling him on his Putin dance, so to speak, what would you say to him?
Well, look, I think Donald Trump's done very well without my advice, and he'll continue to do well on his own. So I'm not going to give him advice. I think he speaks for himself, and he articulates something that I think is why Americans are tired of doublespeak. He speaks his mind, and I think that's something that most Americans right now find attractive in a world where they're being spoon-fed sound bites and more of the same of the establishment
do you think
that Hillary Clinton represents.
Do you think it's okay that he gives kudos to a man who is basically a dictator, a man who jails journalists, a man who invades countries? Do you think it's okay for your candidate to be giving him kudos?
I think that a lot of folks in the media are overplaying this and trying to talk about him doing kudos. He was very clear about the context in which he was doing it. He didn't approve of the system of government or the way he did, but he had given him a compliment, and he said, I appreciate his compliment. I don't agree with their system of government, but let's keep it in context, Donnie.
Sean, do you think Vladimir Putin's a better leader than Barack Obama?
That's not and I don't think it is two totally separate, different systems of government, and I think it's hard to make an apples and apples competition.
That's what Donald Trump.
I'm a proud American, and I think we should all be respectful of the office of the President of the United States.
But that's what Donald Trump did. He said that Vladimir Putin was a better leader than Barack Obama. So do you agree with that or not?
I gave you my answer, John.
You did?
Yes, and I'm not going to. I mean, Donald Trump speaks for Donald Trump. I think if he's made it very clear what he believes, and I think that our job is to help get out the word and make that contrast with Hillary Clinton. But he's very clear, and I think taking part of that quote in context, or out of context rather, is a little misleading. I mean, he was very clear that he didn't approve of the system of government that exists in Russia or some of the actions, but he was talking about the following that he had and the decisiveness, especially with respect to how Russia is dealing with ISIS.
Okay. I actually don't think it's an unfair question to ask you whether you think Vladimir Putin's a better leader than Barack Obama. It's just a straightforward question. It's either a yes or no.
I don't think it matters what I think. Donald Trump has stated his position. I think you doing mental gymnastics over and over again on this is not getting any further.
Go ahead, Donnie.
Okay. Rudy Giuliani last night went on record on Chris Matthews and said that Mr. Trump has acknowledged that basically the birther movement was false and that Barack Obama is a U.S. citizen. Has Donald Trump come out and said that?
Not that I'm aware of, but I take Mayor Giuliani spends a lot of time with him, so if he's said it, I trust what the mayor has said.
But Sean, you're spending some fair amount of time in Trump Tower now, so again, just to follow up on Donnie's question, there is some question. I have not heard Mr. Trump say now that he believes that Barack Obama is a legitimate president who was born in the United States. Mayor Giuliani said that last night. Does Mayor Giuliani speak for the Trump campaign, to your knowledge, on this matter? Does he have Donald Trump's proxy on this?
Mayor Giuliani spends a lot of time with him. I know that, and he has his counsel. He's giving him counsel and spending time with him on a variety of subjects. So I'm sure that if the mayor said it, then that's what he believes or he said. But I have no reason to doubt what Mayor Giuliani said.
Right. But do you know, just as a matter of fact, whether Donald Trump believes Barack Obama was born in America now?
I do. I have not heard him say that. That has not been a subject of conversation. No.
Right. So after there's been a lot of reporting, and I really want you to try to clear this up. There's been a lot of reporting on right now about the state of relations between the RNC and you're at the point of this, the state of the relations between the RNC and the Trump campaign. When Chairman Priebus didn't put out a statement after Donald Trump's immigration speech, there was a New York Times story that suggested there was a lot of discord. What's the state of affairs there?
Well, that was entirely false. There was never a statement drafted, never one asked for. I mean, it literally was made up of whole cloth. There was never a statement. There was never a draft. There was never a thought. There was never a question. There was never an email about a statement. It literally was completely false. The state of relations, as you noted, I've been up at Trump Tower. Chairman Priebus was up there this week. He was on the plane with Donald Trump. We were speaking at voter values together. We just held a call about our ground game with Dave Bossy of the Trump campaign, touting what we've actually done to put the most comprehensive ground game in terms of voter contact and people out on the ground. So I think we have a tremendous relationship with the Trump campaign. It's probably one of the best hand-in-glove operations that I've ever seen in the last 30 years in politics.
There's been a lot of talk about the Trump Get Out the Vote campaign. And I think the words he used was, in the history of politics, we're going to have the greatest get out vote ground game yet. When we see field offices in various states, we see Hillary Clinton with 58 offices in Florida, and I think Donald Trump with 1 or 2. How is that magically, where are those elves going to come from?
That's actually, yeah, that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Donnie, because here's the problem. The Hillary Clinton campaign has gone out there and touted offices. And frankly, we do have a ton of offices. I think we have 30-something offices in Florida, 40 or 50 in Ohio, and more coming online every day. But the bottom line, and here's the bigger thing, it's what they're not talking about. They're not talking about voter contact, and they're not talking about staff. 4 years ago, we started deploying staff in all of these battleground states on a year-round basis. We've made over 4.4 million voter contacts. We have over 6,000 staff in the field right now. In context, we had 596 in the 2012 election. That is an exponential factor of 12. We can tout those numbers. We can talk about our staff. We can talk about our voter contact. The Clinton campaign, by their own account, just got staff into the field a few months ago. The only thing that they can talk about right now is staff offices. That's like me talking about the number of cars that I own as like somehow I'm a good driver. You need drivers in those cars. We've been out in the field for 4 years now, making voter contacts, training people. We have the most comprehensive ground game, bar none, of any political operation in history.
Sean, real quick, Vice Presidential nominee Mike Pence has said that he's going to release his tax returns. When he said he was going to release his tax returns, he said Donald Trump and I are both going to release our tax returns. Do you know of any plans currently afoot for Donald Trump to release his tax returns?
I'm not aware of one.
Okay.
But I think, when it comes to disclosure, I'd like to say, I mean, one of the big things right now is in terms of the Clinton Foundation. I mean, we've got a huge transparency issue there in terms of, I think if we want to really get out someone who was in government and had an opportunity to show, instead of shredding emails, let's find out what's out there.
Appreciate
it. The Clinton campaign refuses to give up the emails from the foundation, show really what happened and what the quid pro quos were. I mean, that's where the real transparency issue is.
Sean, I appreciate that. I think the ultimate transparency issue, in fact, is this tax return issue, and I appreciate you don't know whether he's going to do it or not. I'm interested, since since Governor Pence said that it was going to happen. I was hoping that we were finally going to get those. Anyway, Sean Spicer, thank you very much. We have a special guest up next. Former Clinton chief strategist Mark Penn will join us after the break. Welcome back. We are joined now by Mark Penn, a longtime pollster who once worked as Hillary Clinton's chief strategist during her campaign for the presidency in 2008. He joins us now from Bloomberg's D.C. bureau. Mark, good to see you. You spent a lot of time in 2008 with Hillary Clinton trying to get her to get over the commander-in-chief threshold. She clearly is over that threshold now, and yet there's some current polling that suggests that more Americans think Donald Trump is a credible commander-in-chief than Hillary Clinton. How do you explain that?
Well, look, I think that some voters are attracted by this overall kind of tough act, I think, that Donald Trump has. I think it's one of the jobs that she has in the upcoming debate is to really establish that she is the 3M candidate, the right commander-in-chief. Of course, I worked with her since 2000 in the Senate races, and she was strong, substantive, a real doer, and I think those qualities, of course, are just hard to see in the fog of this very personal campaign right now.
Mark, you obviously know her very well personally. I've met her on a number of occasions. She's incredibly likable and real in person. Obviously, that doesn't always translate on the camera. The last few days, we've seen, I think, a very smart and calculated effort to kind of show more of the human side, her telling her story about what she being harassed in school. If you were advising her to this day, would you say keep that going, put the foot to the pedal on that, let people see Hillary?
Look, I've always thought that was helpful, but I never thought that was really definitive in terms of what's going on here. The questions that she's got to overcome now are really those negative favorability and honesty numbers. And she has to make a good case that the American people are best off trusting her. And I think that's generally about what she's going to do, how she's going to do it. And if she can add to that some personal flavor that adds some additional connection to that, I think that's great. But it's not what I've seen be really definitive. Go back to the first debate, right, against Bernie Sanders. The campaign was having a lot of problems, and in that first debate, she decisively defeated Sanders. Now, he came back in later debates, but in that debate, she was strong, she understood the issues, she was a real, not just a presidential candidate, but a president, I think, in her presentation, and she's always done best when she does that.
So, Mark, you just pointed to an obvious problem that she has, which is that a lot of people don't trust her, and a lot of people think she's a liar and that she's corrupt. And this is a core of what Trump's argument is against her, right? That's the argument he's pressing almost every day. What would you advise her to do? You said that was the central thing she had to do to win in some ways. How would you advise her to eradicate some of those feelings that some voters have?
Well, look, I think really the debate is going to be the central issue, and it will come through. I think that we've gone through a bad patch post convention where the bounce came down, but I think she could restore pretty much to where she was in the bounce. Remember, right now, both Trump and Hillary have very high negatives. Yep. Both Trump and Hillary are seen as dishonest, but only one candidate is seen as really qualified to be president. That's Hillary Clinton. But Mark, by 2-to-1, people say Trump is not. She has to just bring that difference alive, whether it's on foreign policy, whether it's on economic policy, right, whether it's dealing with crime in the cities. She's got to show across a diversity of issues that she's there, going to work for people in real and tangible ways, so that people have a reason other than personality to cast their ballot. Because the people who are most decisive in this election are going to be people who don't like either candidate.
Mark, with all due respect, I think those are all very smart points, but none of them go to the question of trust or to honesty, which you raised a second ago. Is there anything affirmatively she can do to fix those negatives that she has attached to her? And if so, what is it?
Well, I don't really think there's a silver bullet about this. I mean, look, if and when more stuff should come out, look, I think she can be more forthright. I think she could be more forthright, I think, in answering those questions that come up, that people want to see her. You've seen a number of instances in politics when charges mount up against someone, and really kind of underscoring that she was a public servant from day one. She cared about people. She's devoted her life to that, and that to be as responsive as possible as that.
Mark, I don't think at this point there's anything she can do. The pure play for her is make Trump unacceptable and too frightening. She's baked in. She's 30 years in front of us. People don't trust her. Make untrustworthy a better choice than imbalanced.
Well, I think that's the current strategy, and the current strategy is showing limits. See, the current strategy is saying, look, and I say there are 4 kinds of voters. People who like both of them, 0%. People like Hillary, not Trump, 40%. People like Trump, not Hillary, 40%. People don't like both, 20%. Right. So how do you deal with that 20%?
You scare the bejesus out of them.
Right, you say lesser of 2 evils, he's unacceptable.
All right.
But you know, right? But that's not the only way. Right. You may either make her more acceptable, or you say, look, this is what the election is about. It's about the way we go forward in this country on immigration, on race relations, on the economy,
Mark,
and that she's got the vision to move it forward.
We got to go. You're going to be here in New York fairly soon. We're going to have you on the show. It's great to see you back on TV. Donnie Deutsch, ad man, Mark Penn, pollster.
This guy fired me once.
We're going to check.
This guy actually
All right,
fired
enough. Coming up, we're going to check in with 2 political reporters following the presidential race. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can listen to us as well on the radio, Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We will be right back.
Can I say I was surprised? I'm not sure anything surprises us anymore, but I was certainly disappointed that someone running for president of the United States would continue this unseemly identification with and praise of the Russian president, including on Russian television.
Of course, that was Hillary Clinton here in Gotham City just moments ago, responding to a question about Trump's phoner with Russian-backed TV network RT America. Joining us now, Bloomberg senior White House correspondent, reporter who has been covering Hillary Clinton, Margaret Tove, and Washington, D.C. national reporter for the Washington Post, Robert Costa. Robert, let me start with you. I've heard murmurings that one of the reasons behind Trump's love of Russia and love of Putin is that, and one of the reasons he's not going to be releasing his tax returns is that a lot of business with Russian banks. Has any of your reporting turned that up?
The Washington Post has reported extensively about how Trump's organization and his son, Donald Trump Jr., have talked in the past about how Russian interests and Russian money has flowed into different Trump projects throughout the world. Because the Trump organization's private, it's been hard to map all of this out. But we've seen Don Jr. talk about it publicly.
Margaret, we just watched Hillary Clinton just there. She's done a lot of foreign policy stuff this week. She's also kind of starting to mix it in with some kind of more personal human stuff. She talked about her faith last night in an event. Talk about that two-track strategy that seems to be emerging as we head into this kind of like elongated home stretch.
Well, she has one big strength. It's her foreign policy experience. It's a liability to some extent, but it's also a demonstrated strength, a skill that Donald Trump doesn't have, experience he doesn't have. She has a couple of big weaknesses, and a major one is character questions, but also just personality, likability, people's comfort level with her. They feel that she's too much of a professional politician or too stiff, what have you. She's been encouraged for months to just talk more in a way that humanizes her. She's trying to do that on both fronts. Every time she's talking about foreign policy or herself, she's not talking about email.
Bob, I want to ask you these two questions that have been bedeviling me, troubling me, and confusing me for days. You know Trump and spend a lot of time around him and people around him, okay? So here are the two questions. Why does Trump keep talking about how much he loves Putin? Like, what's the deal with that, given the political downsides involved? And two, why does he keep insisting that he was against the Iraq war from the beginning when he just wasn't? And there's plenty of fact on the ground about that. There's easily documented that he's just lying about that. What is his motivation for those two postures?
So based on my reporting, my conversation with people close to Trump, is that on the Russia question, he sees Russia as a way of getting the U.S. out of the Middle East, that if Russia and Russian allies can be fighting in different areas of the Middle East, that would make the U.S. more non-interventionist. And a lot of Trump advisors privately and friends are perplexed why he doesn't say this more, because they believe this is at the core of his belief, beyond, as Donnie was talking about, the business ties between some Russian people and the Trump organization. But he's really more in the Ron Paul wing of the party at heart when it comes to his foreign policy, and that's why, in some ways, people close to him say he's open to having Russia take a larger role on the global stage. And when it comes to when you look at his organization and his campaign right now in Iraq, this is someone, John, who was murky and thought he was murky at the time of the Iraq War, 2003, 2004. Yeah. But that doesn't mean he was against it, because we have all these public statements that show he wasn't against the war. But he thinks his murkiness equals being against it. Right.
I still find it baffling. Please.
Margaret, in Brooklyn, behind the scenes, do they really think they won Wednesday night?
I think they thought they won the aftermath of Wednesday night, because the Putin thing is the gift that keeps giving, mostly because Trump keeps making it worse than he did the other night. But obviously they didn't, because she still has this inability to just dispense with the email issue and move on. It's not just that Matt Lauer talked to her for 13 minutes about it. It's that she spent 13 minutes talking about it and hasn't really made it any better yet.
Bob, I had one explanation that my partner here shot down violently about why Trump keeps going and showing his love affair for Putin, is that on some level he's betting that the American public is not going to think through that this is a dictator and this is an evil guy, but boy, he's strong and tough, and we need a mother effer just like that guy running this country. And is there any calculus in that?
Well, I think there's certainly an instinct there. I'm not sure about the calculus, because when you talk to Trump and you talk to people who know him, they say he has this inclination towards strong men, whether it's in business or in politics, and he doesn't come out of the Republican tradition. The orthodoxy in Russia, which is really an aversion to what they're doing on human rights, a deep skepticism about Putin's agenda, he comes out of none of that on the Republican front, and it's just his instinct to embrace anyone who's a strong man across the world, and he also likes the praise.
Okay, Margaret Taylor, Robert Costa, thank you. We will be right back.
So, Donnie, it's always great to have you here. And one of the reasons it's so great is because you always manage to disgrace yourself in a variety of ways over the course of the program.
Embarrasses me.
But is there anything you really want to apologize for in this episode?
Absolutely not.
Nothing?
By the way, I think it's despicable to say what he's saying about Putin. I'm trying to attach some in-depth logic to it.
I just gave you a chance to apologize to Margaret for calling her Taylor, but that's fine. You screwed that up. Head to BloombergPolitics.com right now for a look at how Hillary Clinton is trying to use Ronald Reagan's legacy to her advantage. Ronald Reagan's legacy. Coming up on Bloomberg TV, Chief Information Officer of Singapore and Bloomberg West. Until Monday, sayonara.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg West. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon today condemned North Korea's latest nuclear test as, quote, a brazen breach of UN resolutions. He called on the Security Council to, again quoting, unite and take urgent actions. Kim Jong-un's regime said it conducted a, quote, higher-level nuclear test explosion Friday. It was the North's fifth atomic test and the second in 8 months. Secretary of State John Kerry met again in Geneva with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. U.S. and Russian officials are downplaying the chances of a ceasefire in Syria's civil war. The Associated Press reports Lavrov said he is, quote, thinking of calling it a day on the ongoing talks. Up to 500,000 people have been killed in 5 years of fighting in Syria. Energy Transfer is the green light to continue construction on its North Dakota pipeline. A federal judge ruled in favor of the company, rejecting a request from Native Americans and environmentalists opposed to the project. Critics argue the Dakota Access Pipeline would damage cultural heritage sites. Construction on the $3.8 billion pipeline stalled after one tribe filed suit in July. House Speaker Paul Ryan, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, and other members of Congress gathered on the steps of the Capitol today to commemorate the 15th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Bloomberg will have coverage Sunday at 8:45 a.m. New York time.
And this is Bloomberg West. Coming up, warnings about exploding Samsung phones getting louder, with U.S. officials saying shut them off immediately. Plus, Elon Musk's most vexing failure in 14 years. We'll explain why his Falcon 9 explosion is only more mysterious 1 week later. And Ford CEO Mark Fields tells us he's hoping a new acquisition will help clear the roads of the world's most congested cities. But first, to our lead. A central bank scare spooks U.S. stocks into the worst sell-off since the Brexit vote. The Dow fell more than 300 points after a Federal Reserve official warned that waiting too long to raise interest rates threatens to overheat the U.S. economy and could risk financial stability. Our Bloomberg News stocks reporter Oliver Rennick joins us now from New York with a breakdown of the reaction. Oliver, walk us through it.
All right, we'll start in your wheelhouse and we'll look at tech to kick things off because of all the weakness. Let's end it on a positive note. It is Friday. Tech was by no means positive, but given the big losses throughout the market, this was one of the groups that actually held up a little bit. So just to give a little perspective, here's the move in tech so far this year. We know that really since the February low, this has been a group that has done pretty well. It's actually been the best performer in the past 2 months when you look at the S&P technology sector. So today a bit of a dip, but they're still up about 10.4%. Versus the S&P 7%. So 2.4% move down relative to the rest of the stock market, moving a little bit further. Not so bad in the grand scheme of things. I think that, again, sort of speaks to the desire for investors right now to get into some of the companies, the cyclical type companies, largely in the tech sector, that will do well if the economy continues to improve. But here's the real story. This is the big one that happened today. This is sort of an unraveling of the bond trade, a very popular trade that has propelled the market so far this year. It's been investors looking for dividend-yielding stocks, regular income stocks, the utilities in the blue line here, the staples in the purple line, getting hit real hard today, at least 3% down in both. The question is whether or not that's going to continue, and if we continue to see yields in the bond market rising, as we saw right here, the 10-year yield jumped to the highest since June, I think that's going to continue to hurt those sectors that really depend on the lower yields as investors seek out regular income. And basically, you're seeing that right here. This is the correlation in the bottom panel between stocks and bonds. Bond yields, rather, plunging today into negative territory, which means bond prices and stock prices are moving in the same direction. For a long time, that's meant a good thing because they've both been in bull markets. But if there's any kind of scare, if we get some more Fed hawkish behavior or even a surprise rate in September or anything like that that signals more than just one this year or in the near future, this is going to continue to be a serious point of weakness in the market that I think still has a lot of air to deflate from getting close to record highs. And then finally, this is really why this pain trade could continue, because it's not just about the utilities and the staples, the sort of high dividend stocks. They're really now contributing to these low vol ETFs that have become very popular. These are the size of the moves in the S&P versus the low vol ETFs. They're supposed to drop smaller than the rest of the S&P, but guess what? They didn't today. This blue bar shows the USMV minimum vol. This green bar shows the Power Shares ETF. They both lost more than the S&P 500, not really completing their objective and their value add today. For a lot of people, that's been a popular trade, and it's going to be important to see if it continues to be weak going forward with more Fed speculation.
All right, our Bloomberg Stocks reporter Oliver Rennick there in New York breaking it down for us. Thank you, Oliver. Turning now to the biggest tech stories of the week. Let's start with Samsung, because warnings of the exploding Note 7s only getting worse. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission is now urging users to turn them off immediately, and if you're charging one, stop. This after aviation authorities around the world also ordered passengers not to use them during flights or put them in checked luggage. All of this coming at the worst time for the world's largest smartphone company, which was hoping to get a head start on Apple's new iPhones. Joining me now to discuss, my guest host for the hour, Techonomy CEO David Kirkpatrick in New York, and here with me in the studio, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who covers Apple. So how bad does this get now for Samsung?
This is terrible. This is, I mean, look at it this way. Samsung changed their whole cadence of releases when they're releasing phones in order to beat Apple. And now, the week of Apple's big launch of this hit new iPhone 7, they come out here with a phone that's literally exploding. There's dozens of reports of this already. It was bad enough when Samsung said they would be recalling the phone internally, replacing units that are affected and units not even affected to everyone who bought a Note 7. And now the U.S. government getting involved and making it more official couldn't be worse timing for the company.
David, you have a sort of contrarian view on this recall. What's your take?
Well, I did earlier in the day until I heard that they were really being completely recalled. In my opinion, with a few explosions, you know, it's bad, but it wasn't going to destroy the company's reputation. Based on the most recent developments in the last few hours, I'm with Mark. I think when your absolute cutting-edge latest product is a total disaster and truly dangerous to use, that is going to really affect the company's reputation. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they start inspecting phones getting on planes to make sure that you're not carrying one. If they're this dangerous, or if they're perceived to be this dangerous, that is really, really serious. And it is, you could say, somewhat tragic, given that they actually have, in some ways, a better physical design than Apple does. But they are not going to benefit from it because of this crisis and what is really kind of a tragedy, really.
It certainly does ratchet up the fear factor, Mark. What do you do if you own one of these phones? How is Samsung actually handling this recall?
So Samsung is working internally through their own distribution channels, but also working through the carriers. Now, every carrier is handling this a bit differently. For instance, some carriers in the U.S. are offering replacement phones up to the same value. They're offering perks like free Netflix subscriptions.
So could you replace your Galaxy Note with an iPhone?
Theoretically, we can get the money back and then go ahead and use that money towards a credit of pre-ordering the iPhone 7 or 7 Plus. Samsung is contacting people who've bought them, whether or not they have one that's affected and reported an explosion, to get a replacement model out. That's going to take the next week or two, really hurting Samsung's bottom line. But really, we should emphasize there's no good way to look at this. There hasn't been a consumer tech product, such as a smartphone, right in the middle of this key tech product cycle that's literally exploding and potentially hurting people and ruining lives. The fact that airlines and the FAA are getting involved in this and telling people not to bring it on a plane like it's a weapon is absolutely unprecedented.
Now, at the same time, you have Samsung and Apple both, ended the day low, but sort of about the same. We saw Apple having a rough week as well. Why?
Well, even though these explosions are happening with these Samsung phones, and it's just ridiculous to say it, but it's happening, there's a sense of platform stickiness. Both Apple and Samsung know very well how to lock people into the platform. So even though Samsung is getting all this negative PR and attention because of this issue right now, it's not going to really destroy the company a couple years down the road. People are really glued into their texting, their contacts, the contacts, and other content they have on their Samsung phones, where people aren't going to leave Samsung in big bunches to Apple over this.
David, you have some interesting thoughts about the iPhone 7 as well, and you're not too impressed with it.
Well,
Why not?
I think in a way we're at an odd moment where nothing looks that impressive in the phone business. I mean, these are the two cutting-edge devices of the industry, the iPhone 7 and the Galaxy Note 7, and both, the iPhone 7 was quite underwhelming in the opinion of many, and certainly from a design point of view, basically nothing new, and that's gotten a lot of flack from the tech press and ordinary users who are just looking at this. And obviously, there's no product that ordinary users talk about and look at more than the newest iPhone. I would agree with Mark that Samsung's got people on their own Android version, and they'll probably stick with it for the most part. It also could be that people just start worrying about these smartphones, period. If more of these explosions continue to happen, I mean, they all have the same basic battery technology in them. That's not so good, even potentially for Apple, not to say that there are any explosions happening on iPhones, but at the moment that I know of, or at least not any new ones. There have been occasional ones from time to time, after all. But I'll tell you, my basic thing on the iPhone and Apple's designs generally is that Johnny Ive is probably past his prime and ought to go. I don't think there was anything interesting in the physical or the software hardware integration design on the latest announcements.
Mark, would love for you to respond to two things David just said there. One, that Johnny Ive is past his prime. Two, the suggestion that the same battery technology is in all phones, even probably the iPhone.
Sure. Let me start with number two, because that's mostly what we've been talking about. Apple's already come out and said that it's not using the same battery components that have been found to explode. But the fact that that's not really a known thing that Apple has said that means that they could be doing a little bit more to emphasize that, hey, we're not using the same battery tech as Samsung. Because it is well known that Apple and Samsung have been partners on the component end of things. In terms of the Johnny Ive comment from David, yes, he had this role change from the Senior VP of Design, which is an executive managerial position, to this Chief Design Officer figurehead type of role in the last last year. But you have to step back and think about how long these products are in development. This iPhone 7 was introduced in September 2016, earlier this week. This phone has been in development since before the first iPhone 6 came out in 2014. These things have extraordinary long lead times, so there's no indication that his new role, him stepping back a little bit more, has any connection to this design. Apple knows exactly that they were planning a big 10-year anniversary redesign for 2017. They knew 4 or 5 years ago that, hey, the iPhone 7 was going to look like this and act like this. Maybe they were planning a little bit more advanced technology, but if you look at the whole smartphone market in general, as David implied, nobody else has anything breakthrough. The main competitor to Apple has a phone that's exploding and being banned from airplanes. So if you look at the market as a whole, there's no one out there who's beating Apple to any remarkable technology. I think if we were having this conversation next year when OLED components are really widespread, curved screens and stylus integration and all that was really like the hot trend and Apple wasn't there, then maybe it's time to talk about concerns from Apple's design team, but not today.
Another big story developing this week on the Apple front, in addition to unveiling the iPhone 7, they're still fighting the European Union tax probe. Today, we learned EU Competition Commissioner Margaret Vestager launched the investigation and began this investigation after the U.S. Senate tipped them off, quote unquote, about Apple's practices. Take a listen. Actually, we don't have the soundbite from Margaret Vestager, but that is what she said. That, and David, I would love you to respond to this. That it was based on the U.S. investigation into Apple's tax practices that sparked the EU's investigation into Apple's tax practices. What's your take there?
Well, the EU commissioner said that it was a Senate hearing that drew her attention and the European Union's attention to the fact that Apple had some unusual arrangements and with Ireland. And that is probably true, although, in a way, this whole dispute about Apple's taxes, to me, strikes me more as an inter-European problem than a real problem with for Apple. I mean, Apple obviously has got a big bill to pay, but the real dispute is between Ireland and the EU, and whether the incentives that Ireland has been giving to tech companies like Apple are appropriate in the context of EU regulations. Apple, it sounds like a lot of money, $16 billion, but this is a company that's the most profitable company in the world, and they're going to be paying a lot of taxes somewhere. So, I think maybe the story is a little overhyped. I will say the Europeans are way ahead of the United States in general at looking at large tech companies and asking the tough questions right now, even though it was a U.S. Senate hearing that was talking about the tax policy. But, in general, in terms of how are these companies behaving, Europe and particularly Vestager are really the ones pushing the envelope. And some of the things they're doing, I think, may begin to influence how we look at these companies here as well.
Mark?
I think this is actually a remarkable and fascinating piece of news given the U.S.'s response to how the European Union is dealing with Apple on this tax issue. We saw Speaker of the House Paul Ryan and a bunch of other figureheads from the U.S. Congress and government come out and sort of say, hey, this isn't fair. This is really going to stymie innovation. And Paul Ryan put out a statement about this. So to hear that this was really sparked by a U.S. Senate hearing is very interesting.
David, I want to end on a positive note because one stock that did do well is Nintendo, which announced that they would be bringing Mario to the iPhone. Finally, Pokemon Go, also an app for it coming to the Apple Watch. Let's talk, which Nintendo is a part owner in the company that makes that game. How long do you think Nintendo can ride on this success as a company that for so long just wasn't where the audience is?
Well, you want to end on a positive note. I'm not sure that I'm going to give you one because I think it's still a little unclear what the financial implications of all these new Nintendo developments really are. Certainly, it's impressive. They're getting modern, they've got some pretty cool stuff happening. But does it really go to the bottom line? I don't know. And I think the stock maybe has gotten a little bit ahead of the actual company story.
All right. David Kirkpatrick, Techonomy CEO, my guest host for the hour, Mark Gurman, who covers Apple for us. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up, Elon Musk appeals to Twitter for help in cracking the mystery of his high-profile Falcon 9 explosion. We will break down what we know so far next. This is Bloomberg. In this edition of Out of This World, NASA is celebrating the successful launch of a space